A few weeks ago, I spoke about a koan, one that's listed in Dogen's collection, Mana Shobogenzo. And I thought I would bring up another one tonight. This is case number 4, and the title is Mazu's Heart Sutra. It reads, once, lecturer Liang of Mount Xi studied with Mazu, who said, "Which sutra do you teach?" Liang said, "The Heart Sutra, or the Heart-Mind Sutra." The heart in Heart Sutra is heart and mind. It's an integrated idea. Mazu asks, "How do you teach it?" And Liang said, "I teach it with the heart-mind." Mazu said, "The heart-mind is like an actor. The will is like a supporting actor. The objects of the 6 senses are like their company. How can they teach this sutra?" Liang said, "If the heart-mind can't teach it, can emptiness teach it?" And Mazu said, "Yes, emptiness can teach it." Liang flipped his sleeves and walked away. Mazu called out, "Lecturer!" And Liang turned his head. Mazu said, "From birth till death, it's just this." At that moment, Liang had realization, and he hid himself at Mount Xi and was not heard from again. It always ends with, "and then he had realization." That's okay. We can skip that part. But this conversation is a really interesting conversation. We have lecturer Liang, he's already a teacher. And he's speaking with Mazu, who's a big deal. And Mazu asks, "What's your thing? What's the thing that you teach?" And he says, "Well, it's the Heart Sutra." And Mazu says, "Well, how do you teach it?" And he says, "I teach it with the heart-mind." Right? It's a way of saying, I go to the core of this thing, right? It's about this, so I teach it with this. And then Mazu says, "Oh, the heart-mind, it's like an actor. And the will, the volition, it's like a supporting actor. And the objects of the 6 senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, perception, are like their company, like their acting troupe." He's painting this image of these characters, the heart, mind, and the will, and the 6 senses, all the things that make you, you. And he says, how can they teach this sutra? And Liang said, this throws him. He says, if the mind can't teach it, can emptiness teach it? And Mazu says, yes, emptiness can teach it. One thing I really like as a question is when Mazu says, he describes this conglomerate of things that make us us, and he says, how can they teach this sutra? And it feels like a missed opportunity, because maybe Liang could have answered, but he doesn't. He takes this as a negation. He takes this to mean, oh, I was wrong, I was wrong. What about this? Is there this, could this work? And Mazu says, yeah, that could work. And then Liang flips his sleeves and he walks away. Right? It's a kind of unceremonious exit. And when he's walking away, Mazu calls him out to him by his title. He's a lecturer. And Liang turns his head. And Mazu says, from birth till death, it's just this. I think I like this story because it's speaking to something that my favorite stories speak to. This is and then with a twist. There's a knocking someone down a peg, which happens a lot in koan stories. Someone says something pretentious, something a little outside of their own grasp, and the teacher knocks it down. So when Liang says, I teach the Heart Sutra with the heart mind itself, Mazu sees that and he says, do you really know what you're talking about? Can you really do that? Can you do this thing that you're saying? But then he walks away, and as he's walking away, having had this role of teacher taken away from him, right? He's been undermined just now. Mazu calls out to him as a teacher. He says, lecturer. And Liang responds to this. This is how he understands himself, and he turns. And there are other stories and other koans that have this exact same moment. This twist, it's a gotcha. You're walking away and someone says your name and you turn and you realize what it is that you identify with. And in this case, he identifies with this role. And Mazu says, it's always like this. And there's something that Liang gets. What's going on? I said before, and I'll say it over and over, there are ways of understanding these koans, ways of understanding these stories that are deeply rooted in the tradition and have a lot of support. So someone who is coming from within a koan tradition, from within koan practice, might speak about this in a completely different way. But I'll tell you what I hear, which happens to be the topic of the koan. Mazu says, how can you teach this with the heart mind? How can you teach this with your own will? How can you teach this with the senses of the body? This great thing, this amazing thing. This thing that speaks to the nature of emptiness itself. And it creates this doubt in Liang, and Liang says, okay, maybe I can't do that. Maybe emptiness can do that. But when Mazu calls out his name and says, lecturer, and he turns around, Mazu is saying, it's still you. We can say that the heart mind is teaching the Heart Sutra. We can say that emptiness is teaching the Heart Sutra. But that's a lot of talk. You're teaching the sutra. There's no way out of it. There's no escape. I've spoken sometimes in the past about how this practice is like being in the dark. Right? Not like turning on a light, but like learning how to navigate blackness all around you. It's feeling the walls, finding your way. From that perspective, what is it then to teach this? What is it to teach Zen? What is it to teach Buddhism? What is it to teach the Buddha Dharma? It's to try to describe to someone how to get somewhere in the dark. I imagine if the lights went out here and one of you were with me and I said, I need you to get up into the far corner of the upstairs and find this one thing, the switch or the battery. Here's how you'll get there. I would describe this house as I know this house. That's different from the house. I can only teach, I can only describe the contents of my own experience and my own mind, my own heart and mind. What happens when I do that? It means there are parts that I'll miss. There are parts that are so obvious to me because I've gone up and down those stairs so many times, because I've turned that corner so many times that I don't think about it anymore. And I'll forget to tell you. And when you get to that place, you'll trip. Because I forgot that was there. And there are other parts where the house is particularly old and the wood has this particular texture, and I'll linger there and I'll say, really feel that. Because it fascinates me. It fascinates me, and so I'll tell you that this is really important. This one wall, this one corner, this one step matters so much. You should spend some time there. And in this way, you'll hear what my experience of the house is. And you'll follow along and you'll find that place that I'm so fascinated with, that place that I can't stop talking about. And you'll trip on the place that I didn't say anything about at all. And then later, when you have to describe it to someone else, it'll sound something like what I said, but it'll be something different. You'll say there's this kind of weird place that Koan's really interested in, but there's this corner that is really dangerous. And that's the thing you'll talk about. When I talk about something like this koan, it's the same thing. I could get really, full of myself, and I could say that I'm teaching Dogen as Dogen. No one teaches Dogen as Dogen. I teach Dogen painted like me. I can't teach the Buddha Dharma as the Buddha Dharma. I can only teach my experience of the Buddha Dharma. I can teach what it smells like to me, what it feels like to me, how it tastes. And so for me, Liang did miss an opportunity when Mazu asked, how can they, these aspects of self, how can they teach this sutra? Because there's no other way to teach it. As for teaching emptiness, the practices within this practice can teach emptiness. We talk about Zen as a direct pointing beyond words. But in order for it to be a direct pointing beyond words, we can't have any words. And so Zazen can be a direct pointing, bowing can be a direct pointing. Standing, walking can be a direct pointing. Breathing can be a direct pointing. But as soon as we open our mouths, we're in the dark again. It's not direct anymore. It's impressionism. It's something else. And after Liang is deflated and Mazu calls out to him as a teacher, I think he understands. Oh, I have to do it anyway. I can't do it, but I have to do it. In the same way that I could ask you, so many of you who say the vows every day, that you're going to free all beings and cut through all delusion. I can say, but look at you. You're just a person. and you have all of your delusion and your history and your questions, and this limited body, there's so much you don't know. How can you do this? How can you realize those vows? And the answer isn't like this. The answer is, I just have to. We're on day 6 of Rohatsu. And for some, that's a push. For some, it's a settling in. But for anyone who takes up that period of practice as a practice, it's a kind of connection with this resolve of the Buddha. Again, of Siddhartha, really. With everything that brought him to awakening. Everything that brought him to a realization of vow. We can ask him the same, who are you? And we can look at ourselves as we fall into that practice and we can say, who am I? But he was all he could be. I'm all I have. If I could shout at you right now, your role, so that you could hear it as if for the first time and turn around, I would. For that moment of recognition, for that understanding. That there's a task that's been handed to you. And that there's no excuse that can get you out of it. And that's where I'll stop.